Hey, welcome. Have you ever looked at the world of politics and just wondered, how on earth do experts make sense of all this chaos? Well, it's not magic. Turns out they have a toolkit. And today, we're going to open it up and see exactly how they analyze and compare political systems all around the globe. I mean, it's a huge question, right? You've got nearly 200 countries, and every single one has its own ridiculously complex system. How could anyone possibly analyze all of it scientifically? Well, it turns out the secret isn't knowing all the answers, it's about choosing the right tool to ask the questions. And in political science, we call that tool an approach. So, what exactly is an approach? Honestly, the best way to think about it is like a specific lens you put on a camera. It's the whole framework a researcher uses to look at the political world. It totally determines what they focus on, what they choose to ignore, and in the end, how they interpret everything they see. Okay, so let's dig into what's actually inside one of these frameworks, because it is so much more than just a simple point of view. It's really a complete intellectual blueprint that guides a researcher from their very first question all the way to their final conclusion. Yeah, an approach goes surprisingly deep. It starts with these massive questions like ontological assumptions, which is just a fancy way of asking, what is politics really? Is it about individuals making choices or giant unseen structures? Then it asks, well, how can we even know the answers to those questions? That's epistemology. It sets out the rules for what causes what, how to do the research, and even contains a set of values about what's right or wrong. It's literally the entire intellectual scaffolding for an analysis. So, where did these tools even come from? Well, for the first set, we have to look way back in time. For centuries, the study of politics wasn't really its own separate thing. It basically borrowed its main lenses from philosophy, history, and law. And here are those four original lenses. You had the philosophical approach, which focused on big ideas, asking what an ideal state should be. Then the historical approach, which traced how governments evolved. The institutional lens zoomed right in on the formal machinery, parliaments, courts, constitutions. And finally, the legal approach saw politics almost entirely as a process of making and enforcing laws. Each one was useful, for sure, but each one also had a major blind spot. And that right there gets to the core problem. These traditional tools were fantastic for describing a political system. They could give you the complete blueprint of government. But what they really struggled with was scientifically explaining why it worked the way it did. It was definitely time for an upgrade to the toolkit. And that brings us to the modern era. Around the middle of the 20th century, a kind of scientific revolution just swept through political science. It brought a whole new set of tools to the table, and these were designed specifically to answer those why questions with actual data and empirical evidence. And this was a massive shift in perspective. Instead of sitting around debating what an ideal government should look like, researchers started focusing on what politics is in the real world. The questions changed from what is justice to why do people vote the way they do? It was a huge move away from the library and out into the field, analyzing hard data on what people actually do. So this scientific turn gave us some really powerful new lenses. Behaviouralism, for instance, just ignored the old text and focused on data about how people actually vote and protest. Rational choice theory saw everyone, voters, presidents, you name it, as self-interested actors making calculated decisions. But one of the most influential new tools was something called the systems approach, which tried to map out politics like it was a living biological organism. The logic here is actually pretty simple, but incredibly powerful. Society provides inputs, things like public demands for cleaner air or showing support for a party. The political system acts like a big processing plant for all those inputs. It then creates outputs, new laws, policies, decisions. And here's the key. Those outputs create feedback, which then influences the public and shapes the next wave of inputs. It's a continuous dynamic loop that's always in motion. Now hold on, because not every approach fits neatly into that simple, traditional to modern timeline. There's another lens out there that offers a completely different and, frankly, far more critical perspective on politics, the Marxist approach. Wow, that quote gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? Where other approaches might see the state as, say, a neutral referee or just a processing system, the Marxist lens sees it as a tool, a weapon even, used by one economic class to control another. It is a fundamentally different starting point for everything. So from this perspective, everything flows from economics.
the political system, the laws, the culture. It's all just a superstructure built on an economic base and the struggle between classes. This lens argues that to truly understand politics, especially in the developing world, you have to first understand the dynamics of economic exploitation.
So, we've looked at the traditional tools, the modern upgrades, and a radical alternative. But why should you care about any of this? Because understanding this toolkit isn't just for academics. It's about being able to see and critique the very lenses that shape how we all understand the world every single day. And this is probably the most important takeaway of all. There is no single correct lens. Each one illuminates one part of the picture while leaving another part in the dark. The institutional approach is brilliant at seeing formal rules, but it might completely miss the class struggle that the Marxist lens brings into sharp focus. The real skill of a great political analyst is knowing which lens to use for which problem and always recognizing that no single one ever shows the whole picture. And this is why this all matters to you and me. When you read an article or watch a news report analyzing some political event, the author is using one of these lenses, whether they tell you or not. By understanding this toolkit, you can start to see the hidden assumptions behind their analysis. It makes you a much more critical and informed consumer of information. So that leaves us with one final question for you. When you look at the world today, with all of its complex challenges, which one of these lenses seems most useful to you? Is it one we've talked about, or maybe a combination of a few? There's no right answer, but the one you choose says a lot about what you believe really drives politics. Thanks for joining us.